I still remember the sound of her voice that night. Low, steady, a little tired when she said, "Come to my room for a moment." It wasn't what she said that made me hesitate. It was the way she said it. Too soft to be casual, too certain to ignore. Her name was Sarah. She owned the small, two-story house I rented a room in. Old brick walls, creaking floors, and curtains that always carried the faint scent of lavender and dust. She was in her mid-40s, with that quiet grace some people have when they've lived long enough to stop pretending they're fine all the time. I was 23, fresh out of university, working late shifts and sleeping too little. Most nights, I'd hear her moving around upstairs, slow, measured steps, and wonder what kind of life she had before all this. We didn't talk much, not really. Just small exchanges in the kitchen, her offering tea I never refused. But those moments began to stretch. A second too long when our eyes met, a smile that stayed even after I'd turned away. That evening, rain had been falling since sunset. I came home soaked, and she was there, standing at the top of the stairs in a gray cardigan, one hand resting on the railing. The light behind her was warm, honey-colored, and for a second, she looked almost unreal, like a memory I hadn't lived yet. "You're dripping on the floor," she said, smiling faintly. "Come up, I have a towel." I followed, though I could have just gone to my room. The house was silent except for the soft rhythm of rain against the windows. When I reached her door, she was already inside, waiting, her hair loose, not tied the way it usually was. She handed me the towel without a word, her fingers brushing mine. It should have been nothing, a small domestic gesture, but my breath caught anyway. "You're always so quiet," she said suddenly. "I never know what you're thinking." Her tone was gentle, curious, almost teasing. I smiled, trying to answer, but the words tangled somewhere between my chest and throat. "I just don't want to bother you," I managed. "You don't," she said, and for a moment, she looked at me like she didn't believe it herself. The lamp beside her cast a dim, golden glow. Her face was close enough for me to notice the fine lines near her eyes, the small tremor when she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She seemed to hesitate, maybe for my sake, maybe for hers, before stepping a little closer. "Sit down," she said quietly. "You're still shaking." I sat at the edge of the couch, trying to steady my breath. She stood in front of me, arms folded loosely, studying me the way people do when they're deciding something they shouldn't. "Thank you," I said finally. She tilted her head, as if the words surprised her. "No one thanks me for small things anymore," she murmured. I wanted to say something, anything, but silence hung between us, heavy, fragile. The rain softened outside, replaced by the faint ticking of the old clock near her window. When she finally moved, it wasn't away. She reached out, fingers grazing the side of my face, just enough to make me forget to blink. "You're cold," she said, almost to herself. Before I could respond, she turned slightly, her hand still near my cheek, and reached behind me. The quiet click of the door locking broke the stillness like a whisper in a church. I looked up at her. She didn't look away, and for the first time I couldn't tell who had crossed the line or when. Then, somewhere down the hall, a phone began to ring. She froze, and everything that might have happened hung suspended, between that ringing sound and the space between her hand and my skin. The phone kept ringing, muffled behind the locked door. She didn't move to answer it. Her hand fell from my face, slow and deliberate, and in that single motion everything that had felt suspended started to breathe again. "Sorry," she said after a beat, her voice quieter than before. "That was a mistake." She turned away, unlocking the door as if nothing had happened. But her hand trembled slightly. I saw it even in the dim light. "I should get some sleep," she added. I nodded, though neither of us moved for a moment. Then I stepped out, the sound of the door closing behind me far too soft for how loud it felt inside my chest. The next morning, the house smelled like fresh coffee and rain-soaked wood. She was already in the kitchen, hair tied back, reading glasses perched low on her nose. She didn't look up when I came in. "Morning," I said. "Coffee's ready?" she replied, tone even polite, as if last night hadn't happened. But when she handed me the cup, her fingers brushed mine again. Brief, accidental, but not meaningless. It lingered like static. I sat at the small table watching the steam rise. You didn't sleep, I said before I could stop myself. She gave a faint, humorless smile. You're observant. I heard you moving around upstairs, I said. She exhaled slowly. Old habits. I used to stay up waiting for someone to come home. Her voice softened, but her eyes didn't lift from the counter. He stopped coming years ago. Her ex-husband, I guessed. The house still carried traces of another life. The second chair in her room, the untouched books on the shelf. I'm sorry, I said quietly. She looked at me then, not like a landlady, not even like someone older, just a person who'd forgotten how to be seen. Don't be, she said. You're too young to be sorry for other people's stories. Her words should have closed the distance. They didn't. That evening, she asked if I could help fix the light in her study. I said yes before thinking. The room was small, full of warm light and shadows. She stood close behind me as I worked on the lamp, her scent faintly floral, something clean and familiar. When the light flickered on, she smiled. You're good with your hands. The air caught between us again. I turned, accidentally brushing her shoulder. She didn't step back, not immediately. Her breath grazed my neck when she finally did. You should be careful, she whispered. People talk. I don't care what they say, I answered before I could stop myself. She looked at me for a long time, too long. Her eyes softened, then hardened again, as if she was trying to remember how to keep the walls up. You should, she said, but her voice didn't sound convinced. Then she reached for the light switch, plunging the room into gentle shadow. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Only the quiet hum of the bulb cooling, and the space between our breaths, close enough to feel too far to close. For days, we both pretended nothing had changed. Morning greetings turned polite again, small talk about weather, groceries, and bills. But every time she said my name, something inside it lingered. A hesitation, like a word caught between meaning and restraint. One evening, I found her in the courtyard hanging laundry. The sun had already slipped behind the walls, leaving everything tinted in amber and shadow. She didn't notice me at first, her sleeves rolled up, the soft curve of her neck visible as she reached for the line. You should call out before sneaking up on people, she said when she finally turned. I smiled. You don't scare easily. I used to, she murmured, pinning another shirt. Not anymore. A breeze lifted the edge of the curtain beside her, brushing her hair against her cheek. She looked softer somehow, more real. Not like the woman who ran the house, just someone who'd spent too long pretending to be fine. I took a step closer, meaning to help, but the clothespin slipped from her hand. I caught it before it hit the ground, our fingers colliding, staying there a moment too long. Her eyes met mine. For a second, neither of us breathed. Then the sound of footsteps, quick, light, echoed down the corridor. She jerked back, whispering, "Go!" I slipped behind the half-open door as the neighbor's voice floated in. "Sarah? You home?" Sarah cleared her throat. "Yes, just finishing up. What do you need?" They talked about something ordinary. Rent, mail, the rain forecast. But her voice was too steady, too calm. From where I stood, I could see her hand trembling slightly at her side, hidden by the fabric of her dress. When the neighbor finally left, she stayed still for a long time. Then, quietly, she said, "You shouldn't have stayed." "I didn't want to," I said, stepping out. "But I couldn't leave." Her eyes closed for a moment, long enough for me to see the battle behind them. "You don't understand," she whispered. "This isn't simple." "Maybe not," I said. "But it's real." She looked at me then, properly, fully. The air seemed to thicken around us, heavy with everything we hadn't said. She moved first, brushing past me to gather the last of the laundry. The sleeve of her shirt grazed my arm, leaving warmth that shouldn't have meant so much. When she turned back, our faces were inches apart, too close to be casual. Her breath caught, just barely audible. My hand lifted, hesitated halfway to her cheek. "Don't," she whispered, but she didn't move. "I'm trying not to," I said. We stayed like that, suspended between permission and restraint, until the air itself seemed to pulse. Then she stepped back, only a few inches, but it felt like an entire world. Her lips parted, trembling slightly. "You should go before I forget how to stop this." I didn't move. Neither did she. The distance between us stayed electric, fragile, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. It had been a week since that night in the courtyard, yet everything between us hummed with what we hadn't said. The air itself seemed to remember. Her voice when she called my name. The way I paused before answering. Each moment stretched thin, trembling on the edge of something neither of us dared to touch. That evening, the storm returned. Heavy rain slanting against the windows, wind pressing at the shutters. The lights flickered twice, then steadied. I was in my room, half reading, half listening to the sound of her footsteps overhead. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps. I opened the door, and she was there, barefoot, wearing a loose sweater that slid off one shoulder. The rain had dampened her hair. A few strands clung to her skin. "The power's out in my room," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Can I?" I stepped aside before she finished. She entered slowly, glancing around as if the space might accuse her. The lamplight from my desk painted her in amber and shadow, every breath visible in the quiet. "Do you want me to check the fuse?" I asked. "No," she said quickly. Then softer. "Just stay for a minute." She sat on the edge of the bed, fingers interlocked, gaze on the floor. "I shouldn't be here," she murmured. I took a step closer. "Then why are you?" Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Because you make it hard to be sensible." The words landed between us like a confession. I froze. My heart stumbled somewhere in my chest. "You think this is easy for me?" "I think you're too young to know how complicated people can be," she said. "Then teach me." I whispered before I could stop myself. Her breath hitched. She looked up, slowly, eyes glimmering with a mix of defiance and something softer, almost afraid. "You shouldn't say things like that," she said, but her voice had already lost its strength. I knelt in front of her. My hand lifted, hesitant, shaking, and brushed a lock of hair away from her face. Her eyes fluttered closed for a second. "Tell me to stop," I said. She didn't. Her hands were on my shoulders now, light but unsteady. "You have no idea what you're doing," she whispered. "I know I can't stop thinking about you." The rain crashed harder outside, as if the world was trying to drown out what was happening inside this small room. She leaned forward, barely, enough that her breath warmed my skin. Every thought in my head vanished. Every sound disappeared except the pulse between us. "I've spent years trying not to want anything," she said, her voice breaking. "And now look at me." I swallowed hard. Then stopped trying. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Time, sound, reason. Her lips parted. Her fingers tightened slightly against my shirt. And then, from the hallway, the front door slammed. A man's voice called her name. Her entire body went still. The storm raged outside. Inside, only silence, and her hand still resting against my chest, trembling. The man's voice still echoed through the hallway when she pulled her hand away. "Stay here," she whispered. Then she was gone. Quick steps down the stairs, her voice low but strained. I stood frozen, every nerve alive. The storm outside had become a roar, the kind that made walls feel thinner. I couldn't make out the words, just tones. His sharp, hers careful, tired. After a few minutes, the door slammed again. Silence. I waited, but she didn't come back. When I finally stepped into the hall, I found her in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, breathing as though she'd run a mile. Her sweater clung to her skin from the rain she must have let in when she'd opened the door. "Who was that?" I asked quietly. She looked at me, really looked, and for a moment I thought she might lie. Then she said, "My ex-husband." The words landed like cold water. He still has a key, she continued. I should have changed the locks years ago. Her voice shook slightly, but her face stayed composed. I moved closer. Did he hear anything? I don't know, she said, and that terrifies me more than if he had. She tried to laugh then, but it broke halfway. Her hands were trembling, so she gripped the counter to hide it. I'm sorry, she whispered. I shouldn't have come to your room. None of this should have happened. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that everything had already happened long before either of us admitted it, but she looked so fragile in that moment that the words wouldn't come. Instead, I stepped beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her shoulder against mine. You don't have to apologize for wanting something, I said softly. Her eyes flicked up to mine, tired, wet, alive. You think this is about wanting? She took a slow breath, voice trembling. When he left me, I stopped being someone's choice. I just became part of the background, someone people spoke to kindly but never about. Her confession hit deeper than I expected. Without thinking, I reached for her hand. Small, cold, restless. She didn't pull away. You make me feel seen again, she said, almost inaudible. That's the part one can't forgive myself for. The light flickered above us. Rainwater tapped from the roof. For a moment, everything outside the kitchen disappeared. Just the two of us, suspended in something equal parts warmth and danger. I stepped closer until she had to tilt her head slightly to keep looking at me. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Then she whispered, If he comes back and finds you here, it won't just be words next time. I'm not afraid of him. She smiled, small, sad, beautiful. You should be afraid of me. And then she did something I didn't expect. She took my hand and placed it over her heart. It beat hard, fast, uneven. See, she said softly. I'm already losing control. Before I could answer, she pulled away. Not out of rejection, but survival, and whispered, Tomorrow, come to my room. No more running. And just like that, she was gone again, leaving behind the echo of her heartbeat in my palm. I didn't sleep that night. Her words, tomorrow, come to my room, echoed in every breath. Morning came and went, slow and heavy. The rain had stopped, but the world still felt damp, uncertain. By evening, I found myself standing at her door, heartbeat louder than the quiet around me. The door was already slightly open, a warm light spilling out. She stood by the window looking out at the garden. Her hair was loose again, catching the last orange trace of sunset. She didn't turn when I entered. You came, she said softly. I said I would. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The room smelled faintly of jasmine and something faintly metallic, the ghost of rain still clinging to the air. Do you know what this means? She asked finally. Her tone was calm, but her hands were clasped too tightly. I nodded. Yes. She turned then and I saw it, the war in her eyes. Want tangled with fear, hope pulling against guilt. I told myself it was just loneliness, she whispered. But that's not true anymore. I stepped closer. Then what is it? Her breath caught. It's you. The distance between us dissolved in inches. I could feel the warmth of her skin, the faint tremor in her breath. My hand lifted, not to claim but to steady, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She leaned into the touch, eyes closing just for a heartbeat too long. This isn't supposed to happen, she murmured. Then why does it feel like it already has? She opened her eyes, meeting mine. Because we've both been waiting for something to break. Her voice trembled, but she didn't step back. The silence that followed was thick, electric, the kind that made every small sound sacred. You'll regret this, she said finally. Maybe, I answered, but not tonight. For a moment, everything stopped. Thought, time, fear, and the world narrowed to the space between our breaths. My hand found her wrist, feeling her pulse race beneath my fingers. Say something, I whispered. Her lips curved, fragile, trembling. If I speak, I'll fall apart. Then don't. And she didn't. She just closed her eyes, leaned forward until her forehead rested against mine. No kiss, no rush, just the slow, aching surrender of two people who had already gone too far in silence. The clock ticked once, loud in the quiet. Her hand slid to my chest, over my heartbeat. "This isn't just desire," she said. "It's recognition. You remind me of the person I used to be. And you," I said, "make me want to become someone I haven't been yet." She drew a breath, sharp, unsteady, and finally smiled. "Then maybe that's enough." When she stepped back, it wasn't rejection. It was decision, gentle, final. "Go," she whispered, "before we forget who we are." I nodded, though every part of me wanted to stay. As I left, she didn't watch me go. But I knew she was listening, to the sound of my footsteps fading down the hall, and to the silence that followed, filled with everything we didn't need to say. Days passed. The rain returned and left again, like it couldn't decide what season it wanted to be. I saw her only in passing. Mornings when she watered the plants, evenings when she closed the curtains. We didn't speak much, but the silence between us had changed. It wasn't distance anymore. It was knowing. One night, after dinner, I heard her on the porch, the creak of the old swing she liked to sit on. I stepped outside, half expecting her to turn me away. She didn't. She just moved her hand slightly across the cushion beside her, enough space for one more person. The air smelled of wet grass and night-blooming jasmine. The moonlight softened everything. Her face, her voice, even the small tremor in her breath. "I thought you'd stop coming around," she said, eyes on the garden. "I tried," I admitted. "Didn't work." She smiled faintly. "You always sound so sure when you shouldn't be. And you always sound unsure when you don't need to be." That made her laugh. The quiet, surprised kind of laugh that feels like a release. She leaned back, her shoulder brushing mine. The contact was small, but it steadied something inside both of us. "I used to think the age difference mattered," she said. "That people would see us and whisper." "They probably will," I said. "But I don't care. I wasn't looking for approval. I was just looking for you." She turned then, studying me in that deliberate way she did when she wanted to remember a moment. "You'll meet people your age," she whispered. "They'll make more sense than I do." "Maybe," I said, "but none of them will make me feel like this does. Quiet, alive, real." Her eyes softened, the resistance slowly melting into something gentler. "I've spent years hiding from what I wanted," she said. "You make me remember that wanting isn't always wrong." Without speaking, I reached for her hand. She hesitated only a second before letting her fingers intertwine with mine. Her skin was warm, her pulse calm now. We sat like that, no grand declarations, no promises. Just two people who had finally stopped running from what they already knew. After a while, she leaned her head on my shoulder. I felt the slow rhythm of her breathing, the faint scent of her hair, the quiet certainty that we had crossed some invisible line and somehow landed in peace. "Are you sure?" she asked softly, her voice barely there. I turned slightly, pressing a light kiss to her forehead. "Completely." She smiled against my shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, the house felt like a home. Not borrowed, not temporary, just shared. The rain began again, soft and forgiving, tapping gently against the roof. Neither of us moved. There was nothing left to hide, nothing left to explain. Just the warmth of her hand in mine and the quiet sound of the world exhaling around us. Did you enjoy the story? What kind of stories would you like to hear next? ***.